Good afternoon and welcome to UMedTV. My name is Kemal Erkan. Today we are going to start our political series for election 2024 in Delaware. Our first guest is going to be joining us in the next couple of seconds, Colleen Davis. I'm going to let her in now. And we'll discuss her current position and her candidacy on Congress. Hi, Colleen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm getting ready for the Women's World Cup that's airing tonight, so pretty excited.
Very good, very good. So, well, thank you for joining us. When I look at your overall what you are doing in the last 10, 15 years, I see a good pattern, a little bit different than usual, where is it true that you were an ambulance driver at some point?
I was, yeah.
So
yeah.
the newspaper is saying that I didn't actually find that, but so it was right there. But then you became a physician assistant, I guess?
That's right, yep.
And then now this is your second term as a treasurer
Yes.
in Delaware. So it's not like the norm, right? So it's pretty interesting.
Not a normal path.
Very, very interesting and in a good way. So I think it's really nice. Now, this is your second term, and I want to kind of, before we dive into the issues and the other questions, if we can find out a little bit more about you, because you and I don't know if we met in person. I don't remember personally, but I see some emails that we were copied together. So if we can get to know you a little bit, and then I'll start with my questions after that.
Sure. So I grew up in Sussex County. I met my husband when through mutual friends. He is from Wilmington, and we were away in college. I finished up my undergraduate degree at Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science in molecular biology, and had a very short career in pharmaceutical development. And decided to go back to school to become a physician assistant, specializing in neurosurgery. I got out of school and started practicing at the age of 23, and worked for about 17 years in the field. It was actually when we were caring for, I was on call, and at the time, Nemours didn't take call for neurosurgery, and we would often get pediatric traumas, and we had an Amish school shooting. I don't know if you remember when that happened, but all the little girls were lined up and shot sort of execution style, point blank range.
Which year was this?
I want to say it was 2008, 2009, somewhere in that range. And that's kind of when I decided to shift my trajectory, and I started to sort of seek out ways in which, I could have a greater impact. It was sort of declaring that little girl brain dead. That really caused me to sort of say, what are we doing? We can, you and I as clinicians, and I think in the clinical world, we can work to keep people alive. And yet we over and over again see this type of thing happening where people, innocent people, are caught in the midst of some really terrible situations. And that's really where I sort of said, there's got to be more that we can do before people actually hit our trauma bay doors, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what caused me to start to seek other modes of making an impact in the world. I started doing quite a bit of disaster relief efforts, and I also went back to school. I later became certified in public finance because I really started to see that the finances really helps to impact those outcomes that we're looking to have an impact on. And it's interesting because I was working as a consultant in the healthcare industry, right, for major hospital systems, and I started to sort of recognize that some of the work that I was doing wasn't necessarily in the best interest of communities, and so I started helping small mom and pop practices. I was doing pro bono work. And that's when I decided to run for office. And that's when back in 2018, when I stepped forward to run for treasurer.
Mhm.
That's kind of the quick version
No,
of my
no,
lifespan.
good story. And you have 3 kids, right?
I have 3 kids, yeah. And my husband and I are still married.
That's great. So from United Medical ACO accountable care side, because I mean, when I find our state officials with a background of healthcare, I get really excited because then I don't have to explain so many issues that we go through. And one of the reasons that we started this program with the pandemic and how we can actually reach out to our patients and then be a resource in a different way. So then they, in the year 2020, when the pandemic hit, we all forget about how bad it was, but it was pretty bad. So, and then we started this on a weekly basis. First, it was a lot of code updates. Then we kind of liked what we were doing, so then we added state officials and clinical presentations. And we have another event at 3 p.m. For our patients with morbid obesity, and we call that Bariatric Friday with Dr. Isaiah Erkan. And this became part of our weekly routine. Then we also understand how important the state officials, your roles are for us for healthcare, not just from the healthcare provider standpoint, but also from the patient standpoint. So that's kind of like how we started this. I have in the United Medical ACO right now, we have about 115,000 patients at the primary care level in Delaware only. And as a private practice and practices, because there are about 50 plus practices under us in Delaware, we go through a lot of challenges and wanted to make sure that we are able to reach out to you guys. And you also know that many of the other state officials were part of this, and we'll have a lot of people are already confirmed. Now, we have when we decided on you and reach out to you for today, your candidacy was not out yet. So I knew it, but I don't have to give my resources, right? So my source, but no one else did. I waited until Wednesday. Now, between what you do today in your current position and what you are running for, how do you expect that transition to happen? So I know this is your second term, and do you think with the current position, you did everything that you need to do, and now you are able to go to a different journey, and how do you plan that? So if you can actually kind of let us know.
Sure. So I'll just say that I've had conversations already with a handful of folks, but just so that you sort of and your sort of viewership know what the process is. If I'm elected to Congress, I will the governor will then appoint someone to finish out the term of treasurer. We have had that happen before when Jack Markell ran for governor, and someone was appointed to finish his term. And the nice thing is, I feel pretty confident in the handful of folks that are potential individuals to take over. And but that's sort of the process. And I will say that I have a very good relationship with the governor. I feel very confident that that he'll put someone in place that can handle doing the job and that will get a chance to sort of transition the role. And I will say that over the last several years, I've had a real opportunity to make an impact. Just as you said, facing the pandemic, it was certainly something that we had never seen. I'll tell you, back in February of 2020, having conversations with our fund managers, we were all sort of theorizing as to what the heck is going on, right? And I said, coronavirus doesn't behave like this. This is kind of a strange, a very, very strange presentation. And so, to be fair, I wasn't quite convinced that that this was solely corona.
Mhm.
But maybe there was a mixture of another, smaller, even smaller organism like a polyoma virus or something like that. But in any case, I remember in early March, demanding that our fund managers divest from unfortunately, from aviation technologies and from the airlines, basically. Because we were being impacted in that way. And, I wasn't certain how long this was going to be, but, fast forward to being out at senior high rises in affordable housing areas of Wilmington. I was knocking on doors of 80, 90-year-old residents, testing them, doing viral testing to ensure that not only one, that they understood that there was someone in elected office that cared for them, two, that was willing to step in the gap and prepared to do it in a way that was going to keep all of us safe. And I think that was a really powerful message for so many people. And it certainly was for me as well, because I had people breaking down at their doorstep, just saying, wow, you're the first person I've talked to. You're the first person that's touched me, and that type of isolation can really be so harmful. It certainly was a true gift to be able to see people in that way. And then later, when we had the vaccine, to be able to give the vaccinations was also really a wonderful thing to be able to do. But in that, sort of transition of time, I also had a great opportunity to work with our federal delegation in conversations on how we supported the financial industry in general. So there was something that we came up with, which was called the Municipal Liquidity Facility. And that's because what was happening was the markets were sort of seizing up, and states and local municipalities had liquidity problems, meaning they needed some cash flow and needed to be able to pay for things. And those things were vital to our local communities. And a lot of these seniors that were standing on their doorstep in tears, it meant that we were able to meet their needs because of the development of the Municipal Liquidity Facility. And I was part of a national advocacy group that met regularly, sometimes twice a week, just to talk about what the needs were. Again, that was fantastic because it stabilized the market. In turn, it actually made it so that Delaware was able to do their bond issuance, which was coming up. And so in doing that bond issuance, we actually had the best rates we've had in history. And so again, we're a AAA rated state. I'm a bond issuing officer. All of that translated to money in people's pockets, low tax rates, and ensuring that we had the things that we needed to get by in those most dire moments. Those are all things that no one really knows that I was involved in. It didn't require legislation. It didn't require, bells and whistles. It just meant that I was prepared to roll up my sleeves and do some real work.
It was a really crazy time, right? So like 2020. So I was one of the maybe first COVID patients. I actually did make a decision in our central office. We have about 120, 130 people here in the central place. So then we said, okay, before the state of emergency happened, I actually decided to have everyone work from home. So we went home. first day, not knowing my housekeeper was already infected by her mother-in-law, who was one of those patients that were maybe describing. Then she brought that to me, and then we all got COVID. And I thought I was dying. Actually, the first time I thought I was dying was that time. And that isolation is very like thinking about that is just I think one of the worst, because you can't describe, like, in order to just understand that you really have to be in that position, because like people coming to your doorsteps and you cannot even open the door, and then they leave stuff out of the bag and your friends cannot come. You can't tell your family everything, how bad the situation was, because, you know, thinking you are dying. So it was just bad. Now you were part of the American Relief Fund project as well, and I have questions on that, because as a healthcare provider, service provider, we are not nonprofit, we are for profit, which I don't know what that means anymore in the state where we live in. 30% of the population is on Medicaid, and our patients, 30% of patients we serve are on Medicaid. And we take care of everyone that hospitals who are nonprofit are taking care of. But for whatever reason, I believe that businesses like us are being kind of like discriminated just because our status is not for nonprofit. And I know with the American Relief Fund, it was great. Money was coming in from federal government. It was used well, but not everyone probably benefited from that same, like, as you are a healthcare provider as well.
Yeah.
Know those times where whatever I do in our private office is the same if we were owned by the nonprofit hospital. In fact, the only difference is hospital is charging more than what private practices are charging for the same service. So is there any plan in your is there anything in your plans to maybe fix that issue for the businesses in our situation?
Well, from the perspective of the American Rescue Plan Act, what I can tell you is just that the timeline for allocation of those funds is that it has to be determined by 2024. And so what that means is that everyone who received funding, and that includes the breakdown is $923 million that came to the state of Delaware. Different allocations went to the counties. I believe Sussex County received, well, I'm gonna misquote all the numbers, so I don't want to do that off the top of my head. But we distributed I distributed about $89 million to the 55 small towns in Delaware. So I say small towns, but that's like Newark, Middletown, all the way to like Farmington and Lipsick, and all of the towns received funding based upon their population. Same sort of distribution was across the counties. So essentially, the larger populated county, Newcastle County, received the most funds, and then it was dispersed from there to Kent and Sussex. Again, that allocation has to be done. You have to be turning in. In fact, there was a deadline that U.S. Treasury had for what your plans were for those funds, because it's very strict what you can spend that money on. Healthcare is one of them, and sort of healthcare and healthcare needs, clean water, certain types of infrastructure, things like that are all considered allowable allocations of those funds. U.S. Treasury has a portal where you go in, you submit what you're planning to do from a town or a county or even the state, and they'll approve it. So the vast majority of those funds are sort of allocated, or have either already been allocated or kind of in the midst of being finalized right now, because that deadline is fast approaching. If the funds are not allocated properly, U.S. Treasury needs time to respond. And then, and if again, you go ahead and spend them inappropriately, they're subject to potential clawback by the feds. And so that's where the real risk is. So from the perspective of the American Rescue Plan Act, I would imagine that the majority of those funds have been kind of allocated, not dispersed necessarily, because you have until 2026 to do the full disbursement. And you sort of asked, like, what are the other opportunities, I think, from a United Medical perspective, nonprofit, trying to treat patients and bring great clinical medical care, high quality, great outcomes, things like that, right? I think that there's an opportunity to really be talking about what direct contracting looks like. I know that there's an interest. That this is my personal perspective on it, and it's just that what we're doing is, for example, you sort of mentioned obesity. Mm-hmm. What we're doing with bariatric care, for example, is we have a group, Surgery Plus, that has looked at a variety of different surgical interventions, right? And it's just like we did bundling. You sort of go, all right, here's our global 90-day. We're expecting, Dr. Smith to care for our, let's say, total knee replacement for X number of dollars. Surgery Plus is doing the work of developing that bundled contract at, let's say, Anne Arundel Medical Center, right across the bridge. And Surgery Plus has come to the state and said, we can offer this procedure at a lower rate, plus we'll give every patient $1,000, plus we'll cover their transit costs, or transportation costs. There we go. And the like. What I ask is, well, what's the layer of cost on top of that? Because we're hiring Surgery Plus to have developed all of these contracts for us. And that's where I think we lose a couple of things. I think that there's potential to lose in pricing, but I also think there's potential to lose in good quality care, continuity of care amongst, you might be someone who had your left total knee done by Dr. Smith in, at whatever hospital, at Bay Health or wherever, but here in Delaware. And your next time around, you're going to, Dr. Jones over at Anne Arundel or something like that. And what happens when something goes wrong? Well, you're coming to the ER or urgent care somewhere locally, not necessarily to the same person or some type of, you miss that continuity of care. And oftentimes that does result in lower quality. And having an ACO, participating in an ACO means that there is coordinated care across specialties, and there's coordinated information sharing and things like that across specialties, which really does kind of improve the level of care. So again, I think from my perspective, I think that that's a real opportunity in the medical community to sort of start thinking about, and I always put it to folks, if someone came to you and said, if you were to start a concierge medicine practice today, what's the price tag you would put on every single one of your patients? How could you do this and still get by? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where there really is an opportunity.
So you mentioned Surgery Plus. That's interesting because we, from American Surgery Center, we are their bariatric preferred facility in Delaware. And one thing that they do really well is the care coordination aspect of, especially with the patients with bariatric surgery, because we employ 4 full-time nurses just to handle the initial work that's needed for those patients. And Surgery Plus's approach is a lot more complementing what we do, rather than just dealing with an insurance company who just looks at it at the authorization level. they actually get involved from day one, and then they are actually staying in touch with us throughout the process. It's kind of like another layer to our care coordination. And we are pretty, not pretty actually, we are very happy with what they do. But I do agree with issues like those patients who may, like sometimes we get patients from other states like Virginia, South Maryland, and like they do have the surgery here, and then what may be happening later on. If the facility is providing a top-notch service, I don't see that as a huge problem. Maybe it's like a specialty specific, but for like my bariatric group, you may know them, Dr. Erkan, Dr. Gail Wynn, Dr. Peters, Dr. Singh, Dr. Ibrahim. They are like, especially the founders of CRIAS, they are probably the best bariatric surgeons in the nation, and they've been doing it for so long. And if the service can be provided here and it can be provided much better, with much better quality, I don't see that as a huge long-term problem. But some specialties may be a little bit different than the bariatric. But we are actually extremely happy with how they approach the patient care. Now, one of the interesting part with the election process is when you run for the position, you are not actually just the candidate. So now you have a primary that you have to go through, which is in September 2024, right? So, and I believe we already know that Sarah McBride is running. We have you, and now actually just a new person, Alexander Keys, is it? He actually, I just saw that, actually I didn't know, and then Sean just let me know that he actually apparently announced his candidacy. And I think maybe one more person publicly showed interest, Eugene Young. So let's say we have 4 Democrats running. So like, why I find this interesting, I guess, is because, so you guys are all Democrats, right? So, but you have to win. So you are going to kind of go against each other. Well, you have to. But then if you win or you lose, but let's say if someone loses, it's a little bit worse, but you still have to work with that person after the primary. That's kind of like, it's a fine line what you can actually probably do during the primary process. I mean, you can't really go too far out, but you really have to be still strong. So what actually differentiates you? Now we know Sarah is openly there, and then let's say Alexander, we don't know him because he's so new. But if we just go with Sarah McBride, what differentiates you from her, and what makes you a better candidate for the position for Congress? And you guys are probably friends, or maybe I don't know, but I'm assuming that you guys
we are, yeah. And I think that I'm not sure who the Alexander person is, so I can't really speak to that. But from the perspective of Eugene Young and Sarah, I think between the 3 of us, it's really phenomenal that we have such a diverse slate of candidates here in Delaware, and I think it really speaks to the amazing opportunity to elect someone into this position. So I will say that it's really exciting, and like I said, she is a friend and a colleague, and we've worked together on a couple of items before. And in fact, I was supportive as she was running the first time around, and I knocked on doors for her and things like that, because I certainly was excited for her. That said, it's I grew up in Sussex County. I'm from a large family, but my father's business was subject to fraud, and we experienced our home and all of our possessions being auctioned off. We lost everything. At one point, we didn't have a home, and certainly faced a number of different financial challenges. At the time, and it's still true today, my father has Crohn's disease, and unfortunately, he was unable to get insurance because he had a pre-existing condition. And what that meant was, at different times in his life, he was on the brink of survival, and we would unfortunately rack up medical debt that was just insurmountable. Destroyed my parents' credit. It made it very, very difficult. And the final, I think, piece to that story is just that when we landed in Delaware when I was a kid, it was a space, an amazing community that welcomed us with open arms. And it was the hard work of my parents, as well as a really inviting community that helped us to rebuild and really change the trajectory of my life. I think that it's really important to be able to say that the people that are representing us in DC are folks that have had a real lived experience. And how challenging it is to care for patients. You get a good sense of what people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis because you're part of their lives. And I think that really also speaks to a lived experience that's a bit more broad than the average person in general. And I would just say, as I mentioned before, some of the disaster relief work that I've done, helping developing nations in a variety of different ways, again, means that I'm prepared to really think about some of the things that we do in DC and how it actually impacts people. Because I think that sometimes, we have some really great ideas and really well-intentioned folks making decisions, but you don't always truly understand what it's like to be on a variety of different sides of a situation.
But I know the politics, but you are very, I think you're finding this very politically correct. But you have to still win, right? So this is your friend. I'm trying to kind of see what I would do in those situations if I have to win, and if I'm really kind of putting my name on it. So I'm going to go for full speed. So we may hurt each other in those cases, right? But one of the challenges that I see also is like Sarah McBride has a very big name recognition just because she's the first transgender state officials, if I'm not mistaken. So she's kind of like, she gets a lot of attention from national media as well as the local. I see also like raising money issue where when you have more access outside of Delaware, which in her situation, that may be more advantageous for her. Do you see those as a challenge? And if you do, like, how would you overcome that? Like, I want to kind of see, like, if I have to go between two of you guys, okay, like, I do understand having real life experience, what I picked up from your earlier answer, but I see, like Sarah saying, like, what she went through was a lot from her point. Would it represent a lot of people? Maybe not. Like what she went through, and maybe what you went through is more, less. That I don't know. But being able to say, okay, here's the punchline that I have to win this. So what would that be?
Sure. I mean, again, I think it kind of comes back to, I'm running for Congress because I've seen far too many people and their families fall through the cracks. And I think that that's true in a variety of different ways, not just, not just my own, but sometimes we're talking about people who are looking for second chances. We're talking about people who have been boxed out of opportunity due to, one reason or another. And I think I'm prepared to continue to fight for people. I will say that I've certainly overcome some really difficult challenges before, from the time I was a little kid to today. And I will say, funding my college education wasn't something my parents could do. I achieved that on my own. I certainly had no handouts from that perspective. And I'm someone who has worked hard, and I'll continue to do that. I would say to a lot of people, when I ran in 2018, I had my own friends who said, "I don't think you're going to win." And I worked hard. I knocked on doors. I ran up and down the state. And I don't know if you remember this, but I actually dropped into the race late, just before the filing deadline, and was still able to take out an incumbent. So I think that my track record has demonstrated my ability to work hard, and we've already been raising lots of funds myself, and I'm very, very confident that we'll raise everything we need to have a really good fight.
So with one of the life, I think, challenges, I guess, that we accomplish, raising kids. So I don't have any kids. I have a puppy who's a year old, and that's a big challenge for me. I'm glad that he doesn't have to go to school. You raised 3 kids. I think oldest one is a teenager, or you have 2 teenagers and a younger one?
Yes. Yeah, 17, 14, and 7.
God bless you. So I don't know why you did 3 of them, but I'm glad you did it. So how is that huge undertaking? And I wasn't kidding earlier. I don't know. Of course I have nephews and nieces, and other family, friends, kids that I maybe participate in their life. But just having that responsibility, especially in today's world, it's a huge responsibility. How are you handling that? And maybe that's one of the points that you can probably you can make from your candidacy standpoint, because that's a huge accomplishment, having 3 kids and then staying in the marriage for so many years, right?
Well, I give a lot of credit to my husband, because he's pretty amazing, and he's really been there. I think that's I don't know who's helping you raise your puppy, but yeah, it often takes a crowd. So yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, raising 3 kids is definitely something that I consider an accomplishment, and I'm extremely proud of them. And yet, it really kind of draws back to, why is it that anyone would run for office? And it truly is to sort of think about what our next generation is facing, and to really be part of that endeavor to ensure that we continue to have safe spaces for our children, great education, a climate that is not ruined by truly some of our irresponsible endeavors. And I think that there's a lot that we agree upon when it comes to a variety of those different topics. But that's exactly why I think it is helpful to have someone who knows what it means to raise children today. I'm actively doing it. When I ran in 2018, my daughter was potty training, and we were, it was certainly a big part of my life, and being able to run and also participate in this great democracy really was and is a gift. And so they're probably one of the biggest reasons why I would consider running and have decided to step forward.
No, that's an important responsibility, and it's concerning in many ways. Maybe next time we have you back on this, we can go into the details of some of the other issues that I have. I have some concerns, but maybe we'll have that on our next discussion, hopefully. Now, one of the other thing, the position, if you are elected, this is not a local state level position. So this is a you're going to be one of the representatives of the United States, which does require global understanding and global knowledge. How do you actually see the global issues, these, especially since the Ukraine, the Tigray? I don't know if you are familiar with what happened in Ethiopia in 2020, 2021 timeframe. Then after that, the Ukraine happened, and there are so many troubles in the world these days. Seems like a little bit more than what it used to be before, or maybe it's just like maybe we are maybe more aware of those things. We are paying more attention, but I feel like there are too many things are happening, and from United States standpoint, we are involved in so many of them. Just from the position that the leadership that we have in the world. So now I have to also tell you that in case you didn't know, I was born and raised in Turkey until I was 24. So sometimes it puts me in a really difficult position when I see my country that I was born versus the country that this is my home country here. So I see sometimes on the other sides of the issues, and it's a tough situation. But how do you see the global issues these days? I forgot to mention what's happening in France with the just recent issue that they have. Are you following them very closely?
Yeah, so you mentioned Ethiopia, and what happened in 2020 and 2021 actually has sort of been ongoing for quite some time. And I would say started long before we saw things sort of reach a pinnacle tide in 2020 and 2021. I think that, one of the things that I have done as a treasurer and have been cued into is the way in which money and power are sort of embedded in a lot of these times of turmoil for different nations. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is in our focus on ESG investing, so environmental, social, and governance investing, when you look at it, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, that when you provide economic opportunity and you provide it in a way that allows people some ownership of it, you are then actually promoting more freedom. So for example, what's happening right now that is definitely concerning, and I think people should be aware, is that through the course of the last 3 years, China has been involved in quite a bit of debt, issuing debt to developing nations, particularly in Africa, but not solely in Africa. And their goal, I don't know because I haven't talked to them, but the appearance of their goal is that they've sort of targeted nations that are rich in particular resources. They strap those nations in debt. As the debt starts to become due, those nations start to falter, have a difficult time repaying that debt because their economy is not bouncing back. They are much more impacted by the inflationary environment that we find ourselves in, which we all call inflationary environment, because we know it's going to be a shorter lived and less drastic experience than it is in developing nations. But it's exactly what is an opportunity for a nation that's trying to become a superpower, and quite frankly has become a superpower. When they call that debt, it means that all those resources will now be potentially on the line. And I it's not to say that developing nations don't know that that's a potential outcome, I think that they kind of go into these things knowing full well, but I can tell you that from boots on the ground, I'm hearing from people in nations like the Democratic Republic of Congo, in nations like Uganda, Kenya, Zimbabwe, that some of the facilities that have been brought in and developed under Chinese companies are not providing economic opportunity to the local people. What they're doing is they're just transplanting others from China and a couple of other nations, and providing them training, and they essentially have their factories just set up somewhere else. That's where the United States has a real opportunity.
So, like, China and their investment in Africa is kind of an interesting one, and not everyone probably knows, because like here in the United States, sometimes when you look at the media and what's being fed to us, it's kind of like limited. So that's why I kind of take advantage of my Turkish background, because I have to follow the Turkish news and European news, and I see some of the news, like the ones that we don't see here, I see it there. So one of the things that China did with the African Union, they built this African Union building, which cost them about $200 million. They give it as a gift, but then they wired the building so that every night all the computers and everything was downloaded in China. So they actually find that out by coincidence. So there's always this interest, and that's not always with goodwill. Sometimes the United States does the same thing, but I think China is doing it a little bit under the radar, or it's not getting enough attention in some cases. But it was interesting, because when you get a building for 200 million, and if it's free, then you have to question it. So then they were actually getting all of their data, all of their information every night downloaded in the server somewhere in China. So, and I think these issues, I'm just worried that some of these issues are going to escalate the way that it's going, because I was hoping this Ukraine issue would never come up. Tigray is horrible. And Dr. Erkan, my bariatric surgeon, who's one of my best friends, he wrote a book. Did I send you a copy? I did, right?
You did send me a copy, and actually Dr. Erkan and I are connected on LinkedIn as well, and I saw when he put it out. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that. So, and it's just like when you go into the details, it's just you start questioning why this is happening, or what United Nations can do, what the United States can do. All those things, and that's why your position and our interest in your position, who's going to represent us, is important for us. That's other than healthcare and social issues. I think from the global issues, we are also very much interested in how we can actually support the equity, especially for those countries who don't have the same privileges as we do here in the United States. But I'm glad to hear your interest in the global affairs. And well, this was, at least for me, it was a really great, enjoyable discussion. And I do want us to hopefully get back together again in 2024 as we get closer to the primary, if you would like. And we can actually have some of we prepared so many questions, and I know we have only so much time. Maybe we can go into those in 2024, but I want to thank you again, and hopefully anyone who's going to be the person who's going to support, who's going to be in that position, we are going to support you, Sarah, whoever it's going to be in that position. And I know Lisa Rochester did a great job in all this time. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a real joy. Thank you so much.